Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Antony.
And this is Words and Numbers. What's new and exciting in your world this weekend?
I went to a funeral this week. My uncle, Jack Lamberson.
This is not the uplifting sort of thing that we typically start with.
My uncle, Jack Lamberson, he was one of these people, I'm sure you have them in your life as well, from that generation before us, that is one of these guys that just has it all together. That, you know, if the shit hits the fan, that's the guy you want to be hanging out with. And he was always this way growing up. And in any event, I go to this thing and I'm talking to his son, my cousin, John Lamberson, who's a listener, longtime listener on the road every Wednesday. He says he listens to the podcast and complains that it's only half an hour. So, John,
we'll run long for you today.
Right. So anyway, this leads to a story, which is my sister wanted some alpaca poo.
Which there's going to be some follow-up questions here.
Which my cousin John has an alpaca farm. And he sells whatever one sells with alpaca, but one of the products apparently is alpaca poo. And my sister wasn't there. So this is all sprung on me at the last minute, you know. So there we are at the reception after the funeral, and you're dressed in suit and tie and the whole thing, and they're trying to palm off a 50-pound bag of poo on me to take to my sister. Right. And apparently my wife and John had this all arranged, because my wife had $50 from my sister to give to John for the 50-pound bag of alpaca poo that's now going to be in my car smelling up the place. Right. And I was smartly, nobody consulted me on this. So John turns to me and he says, "How's that for economics?" I'm literally selling you poo.
You've been selling me poo for years.
But it reminded me of a story from back in the first days of the automobile, or maybe I guess it would be the first days of the automobile, when cities, this was New York City I'm thinking about, of course you got all the horses in New York City prior to the car, and they're producing tons of manure, and the farmers initially were paying, because this is good manure, so they were paying the city. They could take the farmers can take the manure and spread it on the fields. And over time, there came to be so much manure, and it was a serious problem for New York City, more than what the farmers wanted. And so the market evolved such that instead of the farmers paying the city to take the poo, the city paid the farmers. Now, there are people who look at that and make what I think are unnecessary distinctions between goods and bads, that, you know, poo is a bad thing and therefore you should treat it differently than the good. And I think it's a cleaner way to think about it is this. It's a good, it's a product, right? It's the poo. And what happened was it had a price because the farmers wanted this stuff, so they pay the city however much they pay the city for this stuff. And as more and more poo becomes available, the price falls. But the price falls far enough that it goes negative. It actually falls below zero. And you could stop and ask, well, what does it mean for a price to be negative? Well, what it means is that the farmer now comes to the city, it's going to pay for the poo, but it pays a negative price. That is, the farmer doesn't pay the city pays the farmer. That's the negative. So you say, for example, well, a pound of poo is negative $5. Well, that means that the owner of the poo has to pay the buyer the $5. And if you think about it that way, which I think is a much cleaner way to think about it, it's just a good. You don't have to distinguish between goods and bads. It's a good that the price has fallen into negative territory. Insurance is that, right? We think of insurance policy, but really the product that's being sold is risk. If you're a homeowner or a car owner, you're selling the risk associated with that car or with that house. You're selling the risk to the insurance company. Well, here's the thing. Nobody wants risk. So the risk carries a negative price. That is, you, the seller, have to pay the buyer, the insurance company, to take this thing, the risk, away.
Well, that was all clear, concise, to the point, absolutely correct in every way. And yet, the most important question remains. What do people want with alpaca poo?
I do not know. I overheard my wife and my cousin talking about it, and apparently it's very good for plants. I don't know. But if any listeners are out in the North Carolina/Southern Virginia area and you want alpaca poo, I got you covered. I will not deliver it. I'll make the contact for you.
How's your car smell?
It's actually not that bad. It had an earthy smell because it had been sitting around for a while. I got it out, and things seemed to be back to normal.
Well, that was a weird, sad, strange
I got
story.
to say poo lots of times.
Lots of times, that's right. I'm not going to say poo at all, which is not like me, but here we are. I want to take us back to 1970. What were you, 4? In 1975?
Yeah, I was in kindergarten, 1975, 5th grade, yeah.
I was just a wee lad of 3 years at the time and didn't really know anything about what I'm going to talk about now. But from 1970 until yesterday, Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath have been seminal forces in heavy metal music and, by extension, the larger music world. And I'm guessing that you couldn't name 3 songs by Ozzy, Black Sabbath, or both combined. And yet I also bet that you know exactly who these people are.
Yeah, and while I couldn't name them, even I, who don't pay much attention to music, could probably recognize the songs.
And I'm guessing you could pick these guys out of a lineup very quickly.
Probably, yeah.
And isn't that something? That something like Black Sabbath could have lasted 55 years.
Yeah.
I mean, there were long periods of inactivity. Don't get me wrong. This is not a corporation that kept right on rolling. But they did okay. By any objective standard, they did okay. And Ozzy decided one last gig was in order, a retirement show of sorts. And, you know, he's badly riddled with Parkinson's and had to perform sitting in a chair on a stage. And yet it was still one of those moments that just kind of stops pop culture in its tracks. Everybody on Earth, for the most part, knew exactly what was happening and who these people were. And that's saying a lot for 4 teenagers with bad attitudes from Birmingham, England. They really did change the world.
Is there anybody else like that? I mean, of course, you could point to things like the Beatles, but they're not extant, right? These guys you're talking about are.
And the Beatles, you know, they didn't last very long, comparatively speaking. I mean, for bands as influential as Black Sabbath, you're looking at the Led Zeppelins, the Judas Priests, right? Bands like this. And we don't see that kind of thing anymore, so we're not going to see this sort of longevity anymore. And it's kind of sad and happy all at the same moment. Scott Ian from Anthrax, a band playing on the bill, said, "We're not here to say goodbye, we're here to say thank you."
Oh.
And I thought that just captured the spirit of the day and the spirit of a 55-year career beautifully.
Yeah.
So, goodbye, Ozzy. I will miss you, Ant won't. But we both know who you are and what you did, and that's really saying something. And this, of course, Ant, brings us to the foolishness of the week. And, you know, the foolishness of the week was designed to be a relatively lighthearted romp through the idiocy that is global politics, right? That we just find something stupid every week and say, look, everybody, look how dumb all of these people are. And yet this week is kind of a mean-spirited foolishness of the week. A congressional candidate in Georgia, I don't know what district, I don't care, referred to the Texas floods that killed all those people as fake.
As fake?
Fake. It didn't happen. It didn't really happen. It's just the news media making stuff up again.
Wow.
And it's hard to imagine how somebody could be, A, that stupid, and B, that tone deaf when running for a congressional seat. I hope she gets slaughtered. Her name is Candace Taylor, and I would vote against her over and over and over if I could. Sadly, I do not live in her district. So I just throw that out there as, don't close your eyes. Everybody's still being really stupid. And hopefully next week we get back to funny stupid instead of destructive stupid.
We're happy to announce that Words and Numbers is now part of the CiVL network. CiVL is a new streaming platform dedicated to upgrading civilization by exploring better ways for people to organize, innovate, and thrive. At CiVL, we believe that societies flourish when their members uphold the civil equality of all people and engage with one another through cooperation. CiVL seeks great minds from around the world to share bold ideas for fostering healthy, dynamic societies. By creating space for honest disagreement among people who share a commitment to building a better future, CiVL offers a refreshing alternative to divisive punditry and insular echo chambers. Words and Numbers will remain freely available, but those who subscribe to CiVL will gain access to exclusive content, including our regular live streams. CiVL members also get access to conversations with many remarkable people who work to build a better society. For more information and to subscribe, visit civl.com, that's CIVL.com, and use the code Words and Numbers, that's one word, for 50% off an annual subscription. Your support helps us continue to advocate for a more civil society.
This weekend, I asked if we could talk about something that you have been talking about a lot more over the years than I have, and that's the desirability of the formation of a new political party.
Right, a third party.
You talk about this all the time, and I say things like, that's crazy, that's never going to happen. I say these sorts of things. And guess what's happening?
Yeah, we're getting we might be getting a third party. And by third party, of course, there are third parties out there. But this is a possibly viable one. And you and I have talked before. We have a good episode where we discussed why we only have two parties. And there are, it's not constitutional as many people say. Rather, the two existing parties, Democrats and Republicans, have made it virtually impossible for a third party to come along unless they do it like the story you're going to tell.
Yeah, well, it's not constitutional, but the Constitution we have yields this outcome, right? You can bet that we're only going to have two parties as long as we're counting votes the way we're counting votes.
Yeah, I think you're right. We're going to have two, but what the Democrats and Republicans have done is to ensure that it's those two.
Those two, that's right. And they've done a very lovely job with barriers to entry.
Yeah.
Right, and that's why groups like the Libertarian Party, that we've flirted with them in various ways over the years, they only appeal to a sliver of the electorate. And as such, they are easy to neutralize.
Well, and they could appeal to a broad swath of the electorate, but they're so busy, how should I say, it's almost like they're deliberately attempting to restrict the number of people to whom they appeal.
They are very interested in appeals to doctrinal purity and tests for doctrinal impurity. And
right.
If you happen to believe one thing that the larger group doesn't cotton to, you will be shown the door.
Right.
And that is no way to get ahead in politics. And yet they do over and over and over again. And, you look at the Libertarians, the Greens, there are all kinds of minor league parties that littered in American politics. And they never get anywhere until they do, right? The Republicans were a fringe party dedicated to one thing, anti-slavery. And they ran a candidate in 1856, got creamed, ran Abraham Lincoln in 1860, and won.
Right.
And then the political landscape was forever changed, right? Because you're not going to have four parties like you did. You had four major candidates in the election of 1860. And you see how fast that disappears. The last time we had a candidate that was interesting to anybody as a third candidate was Ross Perot in 1980, I believe it was.
Right.
No,
and
it was John Anderson in 1980, but it was Ross Perot later in that same stretch of years.
Yeah, and even then, he was noteworthy because he crossed the double-digit line. I think he got 13% of the vote. But that was, and what happened was, I believe I'm correct, the next presidential election cycle, the Democrats and Republicans tightened up the rules because they felt that having a third party get double digits is just unacceptable.
Imagine that. And you see now, Donald Trump hasn't said a thing to this point, and we're recording on Sunday the 6th at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. If for those of you out there ready to send hate mail saying, no, he said lots. One assumes he'll have something to say about this, but it's not going to be on the top of his list, given that his term is his term. Mm-hmm. Right? He's not. Contrary to what the hats say, he's not running for a third term because he can't.
Right.
So there you go. Now, Musk has said something incredibly interesting, and I think the success or failure of this project turns on just how much fidelity people can keep to this particular vision. They're not running candidates all over the country. He said, we're going to run 8 or 10 high-profile congressional races, Senate races, and we're going to limit it to that. And given how things are carved up right now, you could make a hell of a mess if you manage to unseat 10 people who are entrenched.
Right.
And wouldn't that be something? Now, I don't know what they would hope to accomplish, because the minute you send, say, 5 representatives to Congress, they can't do anything once they get there because the rules will be laid out against them every time they turn around. They can caucus with one party or the other, but that just kind of makes them de facto members of those parties.
Well, but am I correct? They could leverage this. So, for example, let's suppose you're looking at a House in which Democrats or Republicans are roughly equal in number, and Musk's 5 can shift the vote either way. All of a sudden now he's got leverage to say things like, okay, we're going to vote, our 5 will vote with you, provided we're allowed on the stage the next presidential election cycle.
Yeah, good luck with that. Good luck with that. And one wonders, right, if they do in fact get a few seats, well, what are they going to horse trade? Their votes for what exactly? Because the only thing people trade votes for is pork. More money to my constituents. But this party is starting with the idea that budgets need to be balanced and there needs to be no debt. Well, what are they going to receive in any bargain? Because as long as they're a distinct minority, nobody's going to slow down the spending.
Right. No, I don't see them having any effect there. My hope is that they worm their way onto the stage the next cycle.
Yeah.
And it's worth reminding people. You know, we did this episode probably several months ago, but it's worth reminding people that you'll have to correct me on the name. It's the Committee on
Commission for Debates.
Commission on, something like that. Commission for
something
Debates.
Like this.
Decides, sets the conditions for what candidates are allowed on the presidential stage. And that commission is not a governmental body. It's a nonprofit corporation founded by the Democratic and Republican parties, which themselves are corporations.
That's right. So, yeah, when people talk about the evil corporations, I agree.
Right.
In these 3 cases.
Yeah.
And we could take the others one by one and decide what we think. But you wonder, right? The only winning bet here would be to send a shockwave through the system with a couple of unlikely wins and somehow let it snowball from there.
Right.
Right? Because the reason people don't vote for third parties is because they know it's just a show. They're putting on a show with their vote, right?
Right.
It's performative. Well, as long as it's performative, you're not getting anywhere. There's no doubt here. But maybe, just maybe, and you start to look at things like the congressional approval rating, which is just in the toilet. I mean, it's been bad for years, and it's bad now. It won't take much for a well-funded group to say, well, we're better than this hot mess you've been voting for over here.
Right.
And that probably resonates. It's going to be very easy, I think, to predict what this third party is going to be against, but what it's going to be for is the more important question, and I'm not sure I see an answer that works.
This is all very strange if you sit back and think about it, because what we've got here is a situation where there's somebody coming to the rescue of the American voter to break this monopoly that's held by the Democratic and Republican Party corporations. And who is this person that's coming to save the American voter? It's a billionaire, and it would require a billionaire. You need those deep pockets to pull off what he intends to pull off. So it's a very strange situation.
It is, and I wonder if it's going to have any legs, or if this is just something that somebody said when the mic was turned on that maybe he now already regrets. Right? I could see where that would be a possibility as well. I haven't heard anything in the water about him putting together a staff to do these things.
Right.
And I think we would have heard something if it had gotten anywhere down the road, but in the pure talk stage. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen here, but I can tell you that both of the parties seem to be a little frightened. And in the chatter good is right. The chatter I picked up, both Democrats and Republicans are saying exactly the same thing, which should be a point that everybody said, well, hang on a second, what the hell's going on there? Whenever they're saying the same thing, it's pretty safe to say that everybody's lying. Mm-hmm. And I just throw that out there as an open possibility that you should leave open. But they're all saying, oh, this isn't going to get anywhere. But if it does, it'll take more votes from the other party than it will from us. So they're already saying it's pointless to waste your time doing this. But if you did, it would just help us anyway.
Yeah.
And one of those groups is wrong.
Yeah.
At least one is wrong. They could both be wrong, but at least one is wrong. And I can't figure out which one it's likelier to be, right? Because both parties, I predicted for 30 years that the Democratic Party would fray at the edges and just come apart. Because it's a collection of special interests bound together with, the mutual pledges of voting fealty. All right, they're still that, and they're still here. Mm-hmm. And the Republicans have gone from what I would consider to be a pretty solid ideologically based party, and I use the term ideological here in its non-pejorative sense, right? They believe a set of principles, and they move forward with that, win or lose. But Trumpism has put that in the closet, and I don't know if it's ever going to come back out again. I don't know if you're going to have a Republican Party defined by ideals. I think we're well into the risk where we're likely to have one defined by naked power grabs.
Mm-hmm. But
so
you see
there
here,
you go, right? What do you do at that point?
The awesome power of competition that Musk doesn't even have forget about winning. His party isn't even really a thing yet, but already he's got just the threat. He's got the Democrats and Republicans rethinking how they do things. This is the joy of competition.
I couldn't wait to talk about it.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, right.
I don't know if this is going anywhere, but I sure as hell hope it does.
Mm-hmm.
Right, little competition's going to make everyone a lot better.
Yep.
And we haven't been a lot better for a long time. Our politics is in the sewer. We despise each other for no good reason.
Right. For no good reason. Yeah.
I don't think a slight policy difference that you might have over my batch of preferences would be reason enough to kick you to the curb, from my life entirely. Yet this is what we hear every Thanksgiving now, that this is how people are choosing to live. And it's really not a great way to live. And so will this make a difference? And boy, I don't know. I think if it's going to make a difference, they better win some seats real soon. And you never know. They could lay some candidates out there that just walk to the finish line. Right there, the hatred for both parties right now is pretty high.
Yeah.
And if you could come in above that fray, you might guarantee yourself a win.
Yeah, and we've said it before, I'm going to repeat it. This is the evidence that the Libertarian Party just has no idea what it's doing. That the plurality of Americans don't want either the Democrats or the Republicans. There's a chunk of voters, a huge chunk, like 40+% sitting there, and the Libertarians can't manage to capture them. That tells me there's something seriously wrong with Libertarians. And I agree with so much of their platform. It's the execution that's the problem.
Yeah, you and I had the pleasure of moderating a Libertarian debate, and that was a strange night for me. A very strange night.
Yeah.
But the Libertarians, for whatever the reason, still like us because I have accepted the invitation to speak to the Western Australian Libertarians.
I know. I saw that. In fact, I was kind of trying to get my foot in the door so that both of us get to
look,
be on
if you
there.
want to be awake at 4:30 in the morning, you join right on.
Yeah. But this is
1:30 in the morning for me, no big deal. But it's interesting to me that Libertarians still want to talk to us.
Right. Well, but I think there's a lot of principled people out there who, I think, like us, generally agree with the fundamentals that the Libertarians hold up. It's the nonsense infighting and purity tests that they've got no time for. Yeah, I got to the point that I've stopped overtly using the term libertarian because
I have too.
It's always carried baggage, but it carries way too much baggage now.
Yeah, no, that's right. We are classical liberals.
Yeah.
Fully in league with Jefferson and Madison.
Right.
Who Republicans not too long ago referred to as those crazy libertarian kids. That's not exactly true, but close enough.
Words and Numbers is a CiVL original podcast. James and I work with CiVL to advance their mission of upgrading civilization by exploring ideas that promote civic equality and cooperation. We believe that the most pressing issues humans face, war, poverty, debt, tribalism, arise from coercive institutions that bring out the worst in us. We're working with CiVL to rethink how people can employ voluntary solutions to these and other problems. We invite you to explore CiVL's new platform at civil.com. That's CiVL.com. I got to go back to Musk for a moment. Let's assume for the moment that he's serious about this. What do you think his motivation is?
Well, I think he's hostile towards Donald Trump right now.
Mm-hmm.
But in fairness, he has spoken about the deficit and the debt pretty regularly, and was convinced he could do something about that. Found out through Doge that he could not. Right? There's just no doubt about that. He showed up. He couldn't do a damn thing.
Doge we could have told him that. It had nothing to do with him.
And we did predict this, right? Doge cut nothing. And this new, big, beautiful bill that just got signed is really just a thing completely stuffed full of pork with an increase to the debt limit well into the future, right? Anybody can look at this for 3 minutes and know what it's all about. So, can we return to a situation in which the American people, by and large, somehow buy into fiscal conservatism with an enhanced understanding of individual rights, which is what classical liberalism is.
Mm-hmm.
Can we find our way back to that, or does everybody just want free things from the government?
Right.
Because if you want free things more than you want fiscal sanity, you'll get it. And if you get it, you will bankrupt the country, and the country will ultimately fail.
And I think there's a hybrid solution that people don't appreciate enough. And that is, look, if you want the welfare state, fine, do it at the state level. Just don't do it at the federal level. Give people the ability to pick and choose. And those of us who want the welfare state, move to California, knock yourself out. Those who don't, move to Nebraska or Montana and live with, and there are other consequences you'll have to live with, but live with those. Let people select out. I think the reason we're at each other's throats is because both sides are attempting to impose their vision on everybody. And that's just ridiculous. Right. We're different. We have different circumstances. We have different preferences. Let those come out. Let us live differently.
I mean, just our geography is enough to militate against universal solutions to all problems. I remember the first time I had to install a low-flow toilet and a low-flow shower head into places I lived in Connecticut.
Right, yeah.
Where water falls free from the sky.
Right.
Okay, I live in Arizona now, different story. Mm-hmm. But isn't it interesting how we choose to federalize these sorts of things?
Right.
And it's almost always a mistake. Leaving it open for states would create, I think, a lot of confusion, right? It would take years, if not decades, to sort out. People would be moving at cross purposes probably a lot of the time, and yet that's still the better option than what we've got.
Yep.
So why aren't we doing it? And I don't know where shall we call them the muskies? I don't know where the muskies are going to fall down on this. But it's interesting to see. They did one interesting thing, really, really shrewd. They named the party the America Party.
Yeah, I thought that was brilliant.
Very shrewd.
Yep.
Very shrewd. It's a party for everybody. There's not this or that. It's all of you.
Right.
And, salesmanship matters with things like this. It matters a lot. So will this get off the ground? I don't know. If I were pressed, I would say probably not. If I were pressed further, I would probably give it a 20 to 30% chance of success.
Normally I'd agree with you, except this is the guy who, I would say invented, but at least he popularized the self-driving electric car. This is the guy who's going to Mars and making great strides in that direction. It seems that he could pretty much accomplish whatever he sets his mind to.
Well, I don't think anybody can accomplish whatever they set their minds to, but he's much better at it than most of the rest of us. And I think he probably accomplished more yesterday than Chuck Schumer has in his entire career.
Yeah, agreed.
Right. Just to pick one out of the hat. Could have picked a bunch of them, but Chuck Schumer will be a good stand-in here. This is the time, right? The time is right. Everybody seems to hate the Democrats, and people are becoming less thrilled with Trump over time. And people are starting to look around saying, what have we done? Well, when people start to ask that question, you have to be able to say, it's all right. Here's the way out. And then they have to believe you.
Right.
Now, whether those two things can happen, I don't know. I hope they can, because we're in a bad situation right now, and it's getting worse every year. So, is there a hope? Yeah, I think there's a hope. Will this cause the duopoly to behave better? Might. Knowing that people are angry and that there's another option out on the horizon, it really might do something. And, hey, if that's the case, color me happy.
Get Words and Numbers on CiVL.com and on CiVL's TV and mobile apps. Regular episodes are free. Sign up for an annual membership to support our show and for access to member-exclusive content.